problem. Let's proceed. So when we say stakeholders engagement, what do we mean? What do we mean? Go ahead, Deborah. Listen.
Okay, stakeholder engagement. This is when an organization is involved in their stakeholders, what they want, and how they can achieve it. That's the meaning of stakeholder engagement.
Okay, so
Yeah.
for a forest restoration program, it has to be socially acceptable. You need to understand that there are people who are around that community or that particular land are trying to restore that must be carried along. So, like forest owners, local communities, concessionaires, so maybe timber contractors who go in to collect non-timber forest products from the forest, and then the authorities of that community, maybe the local government or even the state government. And so all these people must agree long-term goals with you. Everybody must understand the role and responsibility that they have to play in the project. And if there are going to be incentives, they have to be equitably distributed. What are the costs and benefits of the project? If you have the costs and the benefits of the project, who bears what costs and who gets what benefits are things you need to iron out with your stakeholders. There has to be trade-offs because if you are going to be converting a piece of land that's been farmed for some time to a forest area, for you to remove the drivers of forest degradation, you must come to an agreement with the farmers, for example, who use that land. And you would also discuss the plan, the restoration or the rehabilitation plan with them. So, for example, at the landscape level, so on a larger scale now, your restoration may be looking at how do you balance ecological and socioeconomic factors on your in the area you want to restore. So, for example, those who are engaged in agriculture, in farming, that's a socioeconomic condition. Maybe you are trying to improve water production from the area by trying to restore the watershed. What about maybe people who have buildings, infrastructure, or industry around that area? So you require a well-coordinated, transparent, participatory land use planning process where you are able to link all the various beneficiaries or the various stakeholders in your project. So those of agricultural interest, forestry, other land uses as well. So your engagement must be transparent and it must be sound and just, such that everybody feels fairly treated. And that's the only way you can achieve a successful restoration or rehabilitation project. So you would have done your analysis of the drivers of forest. What are those things that are causing degradation in the area? What are the interactions that exist between different land uses, community areas, farming areas, where people do animal husbandry, planted forest or natural forest? What are the interactions between them? And what will be the benefit of the restoration or the rehabilitation program to the community? These are things you would iron out during your stakeholders engagement. What about gender issues? Are there things that women can manage or men are supposed to manage? For example, in Senegal and Ghana, women were more likely to embrace complementary support programs such as the use of group savings, the use of wild fruits, berries for nutritional and medicinal purposes, because women play an important role in those communities in terms of management of forests. The women go there into forest communities, forest areas around communities to collect fruits, collect berries to feed their family. So if you are going to be restoring such an area, you must think about fruit trees that will be beneficial to the women in that community. So gender issues are things that you also bring to play when you are looking at the various stakeholders that you must engage with. And what is your ultimate goal? How are you going to partition your land to capture both your own goal, which may be productive, protective, or social, economic in nature? How are you going to marry all these things to ensure that everybody gets to benefit from the project? So, for example, what about the non-financial benefits, like improving the environment, providing village infrastructure? Maybe in your project, you are planning to help them rehabilitate the school community, the local school community. The local school in the community. This is beneficial to them. What about what will be how do you protect cultural heritage and ensure political gain for the people? What about tenure rights? So who owns what? Does the land belong to the community? Does it belong to the government? What will be the benefit sharing formula for such communities? And then once you are done with the engagement with stakeholders, you develop your topographic land use map, where you can then delineate or map out areas that are for farming, areas that are used for as primary forest, secondary forest, areas that are degraded, areas that what is the total acreage of the land? How do you prioritize your program or your planting if you're going to be planting in the area? What will be the biological or ecological or cultural significance of your project? What about road accessibility? Are you going to be constructing road to go through areas that you're going to be planting so that you can have access to moving products in and out of such territory? And then in your management plan, you define your objective. The objective may be to improve land productivity, may be to improve the production of timber and non-timber products. Your objective may be to support livelihoods or contribute to poverty alleviation. Your objective may be to improve the provision of environmental services like water hydrological cycles, improving hydrological cycles in the place, protecting the landscape, carbon sequestration. These are various objectives that you may come up with in the when you are developing your management plan for the restoration program. Then in your plan, you select the methods you are going to be using. Are you using natural regeneration? Are you going to be planting? So you are going to be planting seedlings. Are you going to be using assisted natural regeneration or enrichment planting? These are different strategies that you could adopt for your site. So based on the available funds And based on maybe timelines, based on the level of degradation, your desirable tree species, you can decide on the method you want to use to restore or rehabilitate your land. So, what's going to be your seed source? Are you going to be depending on the seed bank? So the seeds that have already fallen into the topsoil, and you're just going to allow them to grow, degenerate, and then colonize the site. Are you going to be planting trees? You have the funding required. Are you going to be leveraging on the stakeholders, available stakeholders, to achieve your goals? These are things you will need to put into your plan, a workable plan. And then you choose the species you want to plant and you establish a nursery. So the choice of species, the type of species you want to use, whether you're using shrubs, or you're using trees, or you're using grass, whatever you're using, depends on the goal or objective of the project. It depends on the condition of the site. So if you have slopy terrain or difficult terrain, that would influence the type of the choice of species that you would select. The climatic conditions would also determine, because you must choose species that will be able to cope with the climate. So for example, for arid zones, arid dry areas, you choose drought tolerant species. And then another factor that determines that helps you in the determination of your choice of species is the planting stock or the parent trees available. So if you don't have the type of seeds that are available to you, or the type of trees that can produce seeds for you, will influence your eventual choice of species. And in your plan, you can also factor in the role of non-wood species that can be beneficial, that can even provide financial returns, like bamboo. You can sell bamboo. The people can sell bamboo to make money. Honeybee combs, you can extract honey from there. Wildlife on those sites may also bring you some income if you can do control hunting. But one thing that is important in any restoration project is that you must first think about getting native species. Your preference must be for native species over exotic species. If you then cannot get native species, the species that are native or natural to that environment, you can go for exotic species that you know that the level of invasiveness can be managed and they can still provide benefits for you. So, Mercy Akinsoya, please mute yourself. Mercy Akinsoya, please mute yourself. And then in your plan, you must assess both the positive and negative environmental impact. So you do an environmental impact assessment, a social impact assessment to evaluate the impact of that project on your community, on the environment, on the social, cultural, economic, and ecological factors of the area where you are working. Then you have seed collection and seedling production. So in this case, you can either gather seeds from what we call seed orchards from trees that are seeding at a particular time and use them in the nursery to raise your seedlings. You can buy seedlings too if you have the funding. So whatever you decide, it's based on the available funds and your objective. So if you have money, you can go and just go to any nursery and buy containerized seedlings. So seedlings that are potted seedlings, you buy them and then you use them on your site. That's relatively easier, but also very expensive, because if you use containerized seedlings, just buy them off the shelf, you bring them to your site and you plant. But if you have to raise seedlings, it take time, take labor, a lot of resources will have to go into it. We have to go into it. So if you are going to be using the nursery, you think about the number of seedlings, accessibility, the quality. How did you ensure that they're hard enough? You have to demarcate your plots. You have to weed, do land clearing, do land preparation. If you are going to be planting, you have to prepare your planting lines. So you do pegging. So what you do on the field is, after you have done your nursery preparation, you have successfully raised your seedlings, you go into planting operation. The planting operation, after you have assessed the number of seedlings you would need, you have gotten quality seedlings. They are ready for planting, and they are adding off means that they have become tough and they can cope with the rigors of being in the field. You have put them under a winning shed for some time, and they have experienced some stress. They have survived that. You go to your site, you mark your planting area using maybe your GIS tools to map out the area. You set up your planting lines using pegs to demarcate them, and then you dig your planting holes. You remove all the weed that may hinder your planting along your planting lines, cut them to ground level, and then transport your seedlings to site. You make sure that they're in good condition, and then you interact with your stakeholders on planting and get them involved in the planting activity, because this gives them a buy-in, a sense of ownership of the project. And then you also put together your work schedule. So between this time and this time, we're going to do clearing, and then we do the digging of planting holes, we do our pegging between these times, and then you implement your planting operation. And when you plant your trees, you need between 400 to 1,000 stems per hectare, depending on the espacement. So if you use, say, 4x4 espacement, spacing between the trees, that will be for a 1 hectare. An hectare is 10,000. So 10,000 divided by 16. That gives you let me just quickly, it gives you, so somebody should divide 10,000 by 16 and tell us the answer. That will be the total number of seedlings you will plant per hectare on a 4x4 spacing. So someone should tell us
625.
625. So you're going to be planting 625 trees, seedlings in 1 hectare if you're using a 4x4 spacement. And then you ensure that your seedlings are about 25 to 50 centimeters tall, so that they can easily cope and overcome the competition that will come from the other plants, the weed, other plants that will grow on. You know, it's not only your plants, your tree seedling that will grow, other plants will also grow there too. So, sometimes you may have to establish what we call nurse crops, fast-growing species, or you may maintain the vegetation if you're using natural regeneration. So there are two ways to it. If you are planting, the approach will be slightly different from when you are trying to restore secondary vegetation. So the initial vegetation has been degraded, and you want to plant secondary vegetation. And you also need to be conversant with the climatic condition. So you need information about the rains, when rain will fall. so that that can influence your planting schedule. So that you know you plant as soon as you have sufficient rainfall during the rainy season, you plant early enough so that your seedlings can establish their rooting system in the soil within the first month when there is adequate moisture. And then you do capacity building and training of your stakeholders. Because you have to carry them along from the beginning. They have to be part of your plant, your nursery staff, your your field staff, the stakeholders. Everybody has to be involved. Everybody has to share the vision with you if your project is going to be successful. And then you have to establish timelines, realistic timelines in terms of, so whatever you can do within year one, you do it, and then you go to year two, because these things take a lot of time and energy in terms of site preparation. You have to plant, you have to weed. Some places they apply fertilizer. Some places you do replanting, what we call beating off in Nigeria. And then you monitor your plantation or your forest for the first 1 to 3 years to see how they perform. And so all of this involve, you can estimate the manpower that you require between 150 persons days per hectare. So you need labor, and you have to pay this labor. And you also have to do fire prevention. So you do fire tracing. Fire tracing is you remove forest fuel that can burn along particular portions so that you do what we call fire breaks. So if there's a fire, the fire will not have fuel to continue burning to destroy your plantation. So it's a very expensive project, but it's also a doable project. And you must plan early enough and give sufficient room for you to be able to maneuver and change course or modify your plans if you need to change or you need to change direction. So you must be realistic, and then you must have a monitoring and maintenance system in place. Because after planting, at least for the first 5 years, you have to continue to monitor and protect your site for them to be fully established. Once you have sufficient seeding establishment on your site, you may not need to do much again. For the first 5 years, they will be competing with weed for light, for moisture, for nutrients. You'll have issues with fire. There will be animals that will browse on them. So during this time, you will need to have sufficient monitoring systems in place. If there's any mortality and you need to do beating up, you do beating up. If there's going to be issues of fire outbreak, you would have already prepared by creating fire breaks so that the fire can be curtailed. So these are things that you need to think about. This sort of gives you an idea of your planting and monitoring and maintenance action plan. So, for example, within the first 1 to 2 weeks after planting, you can look at what you have planted to decide whether there are some that are not doing well that you may need to replace. And then you monitor those that are naturally regenerated over, say, 6 months. When there is, as you want to start the dry season, Azizat Lawa, please mute yourself. So during the dry season, particularly in Nigeria, from November, December, January, you create fire breaks. You have your fire watch towers. So if there's a fire outbreak, you can quickly curtail them. Curtail the fire. You may organize fire patrol so that regularly during the fire season, during the dry season, there are people who will go there to check for anything that is flammable. Maybe somebody has gone to hunt and they've left a fire burning, maybe when they were roasting their game. So you quickly go and rectify and remove such threat. And then early enough, within the first 1 year, you would have replanted areas where you recorded failure. And then you would have controlled the weed and the climbers along your planting line. So you focus on your planting line. So, and then It makes it your job easier. So weed control is very important. Tending and thinning would have been in your management plan. So these are tending and thinning naturally regenerated and planted stands. These are silviculture operations that you use to improve stand quality and to also eliminate undesirable vegetation, to remove climbers, to remove vines, poorly deformed trees, damaged or diseased trees. So they are very, very important that you make them part of your management plan. And your idea is that you want to increase when you thin, you remove some stems to allow the others left on site to increase their girth growth. When you want to help crown development, you can do tending where you remove the lower branches. And so your desirable crops can have a good wood quality, they have good form, and it can also help you increase the stability of your site. You also must consider the influence of issues like climate change on your project. So these are other things that you will do, conditions and management action that you need when you want to do natural regeneration. So natural regeneration is allowing seeds that are naturally falling on the soil to germinate and grow. And there are some things you will need to do if that's the approach you want to take. These are just some examples that you can take. So in a nutshell, your aim of your plan is to achieve a successful restoration or a successful rehabilitation of your site. But there are a lot of factors that can determine the success or the failure of your site. So the issues like stakeholders' involvement is key. Issues like your choice of species, issues like site conditions, carrying along your stakeholders, issues like climate change. These are all factors that can determine the success or failure of your project. So you must factor all this in when you are developing your management plan. So I think that's, I've tried to rush through the slides. I'll take questions now quickly before we run out of time. After about 10 minutes. So let's quickly take questions. I can see some things in the chat box. Let me check if there are questions. Okay. There's no question. Okay, one. Akinremi Isiaka, please go ahead. Okoyemi, please mute yourself.
Okay, sir. Sir, under the stakeholders engagement, sir,
Yeah.
I want to ask why the NGOs are they not part of the stakeholder engagement? Or I'm just asking if they are part of it or
They are
not. Sir.
yes, they are also stakeholders. Yes, they are.
Okay.
NGOs are stakeholders because they work directly with communities. So yes, they are. Any other question? Questions?
Excuse me, sir.
Yes, Okoyemi.
Like there's an organization now, they call themselves Trees for the Future.
All right.
I don't know if I can classify them as a stakeholder organization because they also help provide forestry method and seedlings practice for upcoming farmers and foresters. So can I classify them as a stakeholder?
They are stakeholders, but their jurisdiction will determine whether they can play a role in the project. Because if that particular organization is working in Ghana and you want to do your project in Nigeria, then they are not stakeholders for it. But if they have a branch, if they have an interest or a role to play, they automatically will become stakeholders. Or if they are the one bringing the project or funding the project, they become stakeholders. So anybody that is involved in the project that is affecting or affected by the project is a stakeholder. You must find a way to have all stakeholders represented at the table when you are discussing the project. All right.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. Any other question? Questions? Questions, please. I'll make sure I'm trying to load. I've been trying to load the slides, but it's not been coming through. So if you have questions, please go ahead and ask them because I'm not on the Zoom page now. I'm trying to see if I can upload the slides. Questions, please. Questions? So class rep, please take attendance. It appears there's no question. All right. Thank you all for coming. I'm sorry we had some technical glitches at the beginning, but hopefully get better next week. I will put some materials on the LMS page for you to be able to do some more study, and then we can discuss more effectively in the next class. So thank you all for coming. Class rep, please put on your camera so that we can take a screenshot. Then before we go off. Okay, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Okay, we're waiting for others for the cameras to come on. Sure. All right. Okay. Waiting for Adam, Joshua, Azizat, Alayinka. Are they not available? Okay, everybody, smile for the cameras. Everybody, smile for the cameras. Smile. Okay. Thank you. Let's see if this works. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Have a nice day, and see you next week by God's grace. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir.
All right.